The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome, everyone.
Well, as we're recording this episode, we're in the midst of a northeaster snowstorm. And we've gotten about 15 inches so far, and it's still coming down.
There's a lot of snow out there.
But what's nice about it, we're staying inside. We're hunkered down in our studio, watching the snow fall out the window while we record. It's pretty nice.
It's nice and cozy, and we don't have to go out in it.
It's the perfect day to stay inside. I mean, there's nowhere to go anyway. Everything's closed.
This is true. Well, we'd like to take a quick moment tonight and just thank those of you who left us reviews on our website in the last week or so, and those of you who left us some fan mail, because we love reading them, and it really means a lot to us to hear from you guys.
It really does. I always love reading listener fan mail or emails. It's nice to know that people take the time out of their busy day to engage with us.
Yes, and it makes it all worth it to know that, you guys are listening and you get a kick out of what we do.
Yeah, just that little bit really makes our day. You wouldn't think so, but it means a lot to us. So once again, thank you, everyone. We really do appreciate it. And with that said, we have a really interesting episode tonight. And I know that Beth is eager to get into it.
It's our great owl episode bonanza.
Ooh, I like that. The great owl episode bonanza.
Mm-hmm.
That's got a ring to it.
It does. It's a hoot.
Wow. Alrighty then. All right, all you fellow wanderers, get comfy and let's delve into tonight's mysterious creature, known as the Owlman. The creature that emerged from the darkness above the church in Cornwall, England, was the size of a man, but covered in silvery feathers. It had massive wings with claws at the ends, and long human-length legs that also ended in claws. Its face was described as ghastly, with a wide mouth, pointed ears, and glowing red eyes. At times, it would appear as a glowing light, or orb, before transforming into a giant man-sized flying beast known as the Owlman. This mysterious creature was frequently spotted in Mountain Parish, South Cornwall, around 50 years ago. Owls are fascinating creatures with unique abilities. They can fly silently due to the shape of their wing feathers, allowing them to glide through the air without making a sound. Additionally, owls can rotate their heads up to 270 degrees, far more than humans can. They also have tube-like eyes that provide them with exceptional vision, enabling them to spot prey from up to a mile away. Many owl species have asymmetrical ears, giving them incredible hearing abilities. But despite not having teeth, owls can swallow their prey whole or use their talons to tear it into smaller pieces. Their feet have 2 forward-facing toes and 2 backward-facing toes, with 1 toe that can pivot forward for extra balance or grip.
Several years ago, we brought the kids to the wolf sanctuary near here, and in the main building, they had a cage with 2 owls in it. And they were the coolest creatures I had ever seen. Like the last time I was enamored with a creature like that, it was an octopus at an aquarium. But these 2 owls reminded me of Bert and Ernie, because one was kind of skinny and the other one was a little, like rounder.
Yeah.
And they were so cute. And I took so many pictures of them, and I could have spent hours just standing in front of them and watching them.
Yeah, they weren't that old, and they were cute as all hell.
Yeah, they were young. They were adorable.
But even bigger owls are cute. I find them fascinating.
They are fascinating.
I used to have woods behind my house that I'd go for walks in on my days off, and there was always one particular owl that was hanging out in one part of the woods. And I'd go by, and even though I knew he hung out there, I wouldn't even notice him until I walked by a tree, and he'd be looking at me, and I never heard him until up until that point where I'd walked upon him, and I looked over, and there was just two eyes looking at me. It was so cool.
That is cool.
Owls have been the subject of myths and legends for thousands of years, with many cultures having superstitions about them due to their mystical qualities. They are found all over the world except Antarctica, and are often associated with terrifying outcomes in folklore. Various North American indigenous tribes have stories about owls, portraying them as fearsome creatures. For instance, the Apache told tales of Big Owl, a malevolent being that could take on different forms and was considered a boogeyman figure. He could take on several forms. Sometimes he was a man-eating ogre who could paralyze a human just by staring at them. Other times, he manifested as a horned owl whose cry was like thunder, and in that form, he liked to carry off children and devour them as a snack. No matter what form Big Owl took, he was to be avoided at all costs, especially when he died. His body hit the earth and his feathers flew in all directions, and every owl that lives on earth today was born from those feathers. So when you see an owl, it's best to run, because they are nothing but evil and a bad omen. Wow, they really didn't like owls, did they?
Doesn't sound like it. No, not very much at all.
The Seminole people shared stories of Stikini, a sinister owl creature that was believed to be a witch. By day, Stikini appeared as a normal person, but at night, they'd vomit up their souls, along with their internal organs, and then they would transform into an undead owl monster that fed on human hearts.
Jeez.
Mentioning the name Stikini was considered dangerous, as it was believed to have the power to turn someone into one of those creatures. In the 1900s, an American man named Lucullus Virgil McWhorter was a farmer and frontiersman. And by the way, he had a really cool name.
Lucullus. It's not a name you hear very often.
McWhorter.
That too.
McWhorter started documenting Native people's legends in West Virginia, Ohio, and Washington state from an anthropological perspective. After moving to Washington, he became an activist for the Yakima people. McWhorter successfully opposed a federal bill that would have taken away a lot of Yakima land rights, earning him an honorary membership among the Yakima people. In 1918, a Yakima Indian named William Charlie shared a story with McWhorter about the owl woman monster, Tata Clea. According to indigenouspeople.net, Charlie described how these monster women used to eat people, especially children, and lived in California. One of the sisters was drowned, and from her eye, all owls were created. In 1919, another Yakima man named Tamawash told McWhorter a story about how one of the owl woman monster sisters drowned. The story involved a big chief named Owl, who was hunted by the monster women, but managed to outsmart them by placing a deer's tripe in front of her, causing the monster to fall to her death. According to Karina Bassett's article, A Parliament of Owls, Native American Myths of the Southwest, Father Owl was seen as a complex figure with various roles. He was seen as a feathered ghost, protector of abused children, transformed monster, part witch, part keeper of souls. The Navajo believed that a hooting owl signaled danger and destruction, leading them to delay journeys if they saw one. Their owl origin stories are similar to those of other Native American tribes, where owls are linked to monsters and transform into birds to protect the people. In a different tale, a human mother abandoned her owl boy because she was scared of his large eyes, long, sharp fingernails, and his voice that resembled the wind playing a flute in a hollow tree. The owl boy tries to go back to his family, but accidentally kills a community member in the process. In Mojave traditions, owls are believed to carry the souls of the deceased. Not all stories about big owls depict them as evil. In a story from the Tiwa people of northern New Mexico, a disobedient boy sneaks out to watch his elders in a ceremonial chamber. When caught, the boy's father beats him and sends him out into the darkness. The boy is comforted by Father Owl, who takes him to his nest. The boy's parents regret their actions, and Father Owl allows the boy to return home, but with owl-like features. To turn him back into a human, the parents must lock him into a room for 4 days without looking at him. The parents do lock him away, but the boy's mother is so relieved to have her son home that she can't help herself. She peeks through a slit in the door to see her son. On the morning of the 4th day, when they unlock the door, they see a large owl flying around the room. The father is incredibly sad and asks the owl boy to take pity on them and warn them if danger ever approaches. The owl boy nods before flying off, and ever since, right before danger strikes, an owl will often hoot a warning. With all of these human-owl hybrid creatures in native mythology, I thought it'd be a good idea to see how big regular owls can be. Apparently, the largest owl to ever exist, the Orna megalonyx, was native to Cuba, and it stood 3 feet 7 inches tall. Not exactly adult human height, but I guess this type of owl could be mistaken for a human child. The only problem is, the Orna megalonyx went extinct over 10,000 years ago. So, that might explain the creatures from earlier myths that were passed down over generations and generations, but it wouldn't explain sightings that many people have had any time within the last several thousand years. When white settlers arrived in Northern America, they brought their own owl stories with them, which were similar to those of the indigenous people. In Europe, owls were associated with various superstitions and myths, including their connection to wisdom and prophecy. In the Appalachian region, for example, owls are almost always tied to death. If an owl hoots at midnight, death is coming. If an owl circles around in the daytime, it means bad news is coming. And on Samhain, owls would gather to eat the souls of the dead. In Europe, owl mythology goes back as far as ancient Greece and Rome. In Greek culture, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, has an owl as a companion. Owls were thought to possess magical powers because they could see in the dark, and they protected her armies in battle. Myths about her connection to owls were so prevalent that coins depicting Athena have an owl on the flip side. The Roman goddess of wisdom, Minerva, was also linked to owls. In the Roman tales, owls took on the powers of prophecy, and their presence indicated impending doom. But they also believed that witches turned into owls just so they could go suck the blood of babies. They'd often nail a dead owl to their front door to ward off bad omens. In England, owls were believed to bring bad omens, and dead owls were sometimes nailed to doors to ward off evil, all the way into the 19th century. Barn owls took quite the hit in English literature as well, with poets like Robert Blair and William Wordsworth using them as birds of doom. When a barn owl screeched, it could mean all kinds of things, from bad weather to impending death. But they also had some pretty interesting old wives' tales about owls. Like, if you wanted to kill one, all you had to do was wait until it perched in a tree and was watching you. If you walked around a tree in a circle, it would follow you with its eyes and turn its head so far around that it would wring its own neck just to keep its eyes on you.
That's terrible.
It's a bit sadistic.
That's terrible. And it's like a cartoon that they would think that it would turn its head all the way around like that multiple times.
They also used owl eggs and broth for medicinal purposes. Since owls naturally hoot and whoop, it made sense to give a child suffering from whooping cough a bone broth made from the bones of an owl. Owl eggs were also really useful. If you gave raw eggs to an alcoholic to drink, it would cure them. And if you gave a child raw owl eggs, it would ensure that they would never become an alcoholic. If you wanted to improve your eyesight, you could cook owl eggs until they were nothing but ash and then mix them into a potion. All over the world, owls have been deeply ingrained in folklore and superstitions across different cultures and time periods. And with all the superstitions about owls in England, maybe it does make sense that the Owlman would feel at home there. But we'll get into that right after this quick break.
Hey, did you know? In the original Winnie the Pooh, the owl was frequently voiced by character actor Hal Smith, who also lent his voice to other Disney characters like Goofy. He also played Otis, the lovable town drunk on the Andy Griffith Show. More recently, Winnie the Pooh's owl was voiced by Scottish comedian and talk show host Craig Ferguson, who also starred as Mr. Wick on The Drew Carey Show. Who'da thunk it?
All right, we're back, and Beth is going to delve more into the Owlman.
Mownan Parish in South Cornwall, England, is extremely rural and rugged, with a population of just over 1,000 people in its biggest town, Mownan Smith. There are 2 Anglican churches in the parish. The Church of St. Mownan was built in the 13th century, and St. Michael's was built in 1874. There's also a Methodist chapel and a Roman Catholic church. And beginning in 1926, there was also a rather creepy cryptid flying around the parish town known as Owlman. According to the Cornish birdblog.com, the Echo newspaper first reported an Owlman sighting in 1926. 2 boys were apparently chased by some human-sized ferocious bird, and they only got away by hiding behind some steel grating. It was one sighting and one newspaper story, but the arrival of surrealist painter Max Ernst in 1937 changed that. Ernst was obsessed with birds, and he often incorporated them into his paintings, even going so far as creating an alter ego that was sort of a bird-human hybrid. According to Cryptomundo.com, Ernst claimed that he made the connection between birds and humans at a very young age. When he was young, his pet bird died just moments before his father entered the room and announced that his baby sister had been born. Historians later speculated that the bird creatures in Ernst's paintings symbolized his trauma during World War II. He was arrested and imprisoned twice during the war, once by the Gestapo, before he managed to escape Europe and emigrate to New York City. He left his girlfriend, fellow artist Leonora Carrington, behind, and married Peggy Guggenheim, who had helped him escape to the U.S. But in 1937, it was Ernst and Carrington who came together to Mounan. They allegedly performed rituals to try and summon Ernst's alter ego, which they referred to as a Thranthropes, otherwise known as Owlman. Now, there's no indication that this alleged conjuring actually worked, at least not then. But some would argue that it did work, just a little more slowly than Ernst would have hoped. On April 17th of 1976, two young girls, June and Vicki Melling, were in Mounan Smith for Easter with their family. June was 12 and Vicki was 9. The family had stopped by the church for a picnic lunch, and as the adults set up the picnic, the girls had gone off into the cemetery to play. Suddenly, the girls let out horrible shrieks, and as their parents looked up, the girls were racing as fast as they could go back to the car. Hysterical, they explained that they had heard really strange hissing sounds. When they looked in the direction of the church, they were terrified to see a massive bird-like humanoid creature circling around the church tower. Its claws were shaped like iron pincers a blacksmith would use, and the creature's eyes glowed red. According to JAHernandez.com, the girl's father, Don Melling, quickly sketched what his daughters claimed to have seen and decided to ask around about the strange creature. Pretty soon, Mr. Melling was led to a guy named Tony Shields. Shields was a well-known local hoaxer, and Mr. Melling was pretty angry that this guy had scared his daughters. Shields denied having done anything and wanted to talk to the girls about what they had seen. Mr. Melling refused, and the family cut their trip short. The story became so popular in Mounan that Anthony Mounan Peller published a pamphlet about the cryptid. And just a few months later, in July, two more teen girls had a sighting of their own. Barbara Perry and Sally Chapman were camping in Mounan when they heard a creepy hissing sound. They said they looked up and saw the Owlman standing on 2 feet, staring at them. At first, the girls burst out laughing because they thought it was someone in a costume playing a trick on them. They'd read the pamphlet and they'd heard the story, but they didn't believe it. Then the creature gave a terrible hiss and a shriek and launched into the air, flying off over the trees. Totally spooked, the girls hid in their tent until morning. They, too, reported the incident to Tony Shields and drew a picture of what they'd seen. 2 years later, several witnesses spotted a humanoid bird creature that was silvery gray. At first, they, too, assumed that it was someone dressed up in some sort of costume. But when it actually flew off, they knew it had to be an actual birdman. As it flew away, a strange electrical buzz filled the trees. There was another sighting in 1989 and then again in 1995. This time, an American tourist was visiting Mounan when she had a rather creepy experience. It affected her so much that she wrote a letter to the editor of the Western Morning News. Her letter said, quote, "Dear Sir, I am a student of marine biology at the Field Museum, Chicago, on the last day of a summer vacation in England. Last Sunday evening, I had a most unique and frightening experience in the wooded area near the old church at Owlman, Cornwall. I experienced what I can only describe as a vision from hell. The time was 15 minutes after 9, more or less, and I was walking along a narrow track through the trees. I was halted in my tracks when about 30 meters ahead, I saw a monstrous birdman thing. It was the size of a man with a ghastly face, a wide mouth, glowing eyes, and pointed ears. It had huge clawed wings and was covered in feathers of silver-gray color. The thing had long bird legs which terminated in large black claws. It saw me and rose, floating towards me. I just screamed then and turned and ran for my life. The whole experience was totally irrational and dreamlike. Friends tell me that there is a tradition of a phantom owlman in that district. Now, I know why. I have seen the phantom myself. Please don't publish my real name and address. This could adversely affect my career. Now I have to rethink my worldview entirely." End quote.
Boy, she described him right to the T.
Yeah. According to the witness, the Owlman was at least 5 feet tall. In 1996, a female witness watched a strange ball of light floating above the church. And in 2003, 2 teenage girls were sitting in their car in the church parking lot listening to music when they also saw a pulsating orb of light hovering over the church. And most recently, in September of 2009, a 12-year-old girl named Jessica claimed to have seen the Owlman once again. Now, skeptics say that the Owlman is nothing more than a barn owl. And it kind of makes sense that people who already know the story of Owlman might be more prone to misinterpreting an encounter with a regular run-of-the-mill owl. Except for a couple of things. First, barn owls are typically between 13 and 15 inches tall, with a wingspan of up to 37 inches. That's nowhere near the human-sized height that all the witnesses reported. Now, granted, they may have overestimated the creature's size, which is quite possible when it's dark, and all they might really be seeing is its shadow. But the Owlman has been seen in the daytime. So maybe Owlman is a great horned owl and not a barn owl. Although they aren't native to England and are non-migratory, great horned owls do show up in England from time to time. In fact, there was one caught in Cornwall in 2023. Now, to be clear, this was a captive bird that someone had let loose, and it was quickly recaptured and taken in by a wildlife refuge. Great horned owls are bigger than barn owls. They can be as tall as 25 inches with a wingspan of up to 60 inches. But if Owlman was actually a great horned owl, he had an incredibly long life from 1926 to 2009. Great horned owls typically live about 25 to 30 years in the wild and 50 years in captivity. So I wasn't able to find out how old the one was that was caught in Cornwall in 2023, but something tells me it wasn't 50 years old. And even if it was, I doubt that its owner was letting it fly all over the place since 1976. And then there's the glowing red eyes. That's the part that really stumps me. The only owl that I could find online with glowing red eyes is the Stygian owl. They can be as tall as 18 inches and weigh as much as 24 ounces. But they are also non-migratory, and they live exclusively in Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. So there wasn't one flying around in England for 50 years.
No, there wasn't.
So is Owlman just a figment of people's overactive imaginations? Did they get swept up in a hoax? I don't know. But there are some people out there that say the connection between owls and other dimensions is very real. In fact, there's a pretty popular theory that owls are harbingers of alien encounters. The tie between owls and aliens seems to begin in Sweden in 1966, or at least that's the most well-known connection story. Known as the Sorbo case, it sparked decades of owl alien believers. So, the Sorbo case is that two 15-year-old boys were on their way home from a dance hall in July of 1966. They were sharing a moped that they'd illegally modified, so they were driving along back roads so they wouldn't get caught. They were trying to stay out of sight. About halfway through their 8-mile ride, they stopped at the side of the road to take a quick pee break, and one of them spotted an owl perched on top of a hay rack, staring down at them. It was still somewhat light out, but one of the boys was an avid bird watcher, and he wanted his buddy to see it. So he aimed the moped's headlight towards the owl to light it up better. To their shock, there wasn't just a bird to see. About 150 meters above the owl, hanging at a 45-degree angle, was a huge silver craft. It was moving slowly and silently. But then it began to flash all kinds of lights at them, like a camera going off over and over. The boys were pretty excited and decided to follow it for as long as they could. Eventually, the craft actually landed in a field. They described a sort of mist billowing around it. It didn't stay put for very long before it rose from the ground and followed some power lines. The two boys, at that point, decided to get home as fast as they could and tell their parents to go outside and see this thing. But before they could, the craft shot off into the sky at an incredible speed and disappeared. The connection between seeing the owl and then seeing a UFO might seem like just a weird coincidence, but for decades now, people have been reporting similar experiences. The concept has become so popular that it's actually a major plot point in the Netflix series Resident Alien. The researcher at the forefront of this theory is Mike Cleland. An avid outdoorsman and author, Cleland had what he considers an alien encounter when he was 30. His encounter didn't include owls, but as he started to question what he'd experienced, which was 5 spindly-legged aliens in his backyard, he came across some stories of people seeing owls before seeing a UFO. Intrigued, he decided to see what else he could find out. Apparently, he found a lot, and when he put out an open call for more stories at various UFO conventions, they came flooding in. In 2015, he published the book, The Messengers, Owls, Synchronicity, and the UFO Abductee, a memoir of both his own experience and all of the owl-related stories that he'd collected. Some of the stories include people who claimed an owl would sit on the same branch every single day and watch them as they left for work, and then watch them again when they got home. Some encountered impossibly tall owls, 4 feet or taller, in odd places, like the middle of their driveway in the middle of the night. Either right before or right after they also saw a UFO. But even more common is the connection between owls and missing time. Dozens of people shared stories about seeing an owl and stopping to admire it. They would watch it for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, just kind of mesmerized by it, which is easy to be, like those 2 owls that I thought were really cool at the wolf sanctuary. And then when they'd go back inside or get back into their car, they'd realize that hours had actually gone by. Clellan would like to know why. What is it about owls that seem to be otherworldly in a way that biology can't explain? Owls have captured humans' attention and imagination since the beginning of time. Whether you consider them creepy and predictors of doom, or wise and all-knowing, they've certainly played a huge role in our cultural beliefs, superstitions, and storytelling.
Well, with their eyes, the shape of them, they kind of do have an alien appearance to them.
I could see people seeing a white or gray feathered owl staring in through a window and 100% thinking it's a gray alien.
Yeah, I could see that too.
Depending on how it's illuminated in their yard or whatever the situation is.
Right.
Absolutely.
They are definitely beautiful creatures.
They are really cool.
I just love their eyes.
Yeah, I have a thing for owls too. Remember when I was knitting all the owls and making them all out of felt and then selling them at the craft show?
Yes. You had hundreds of them.
I had hundreds of felt owls.
And we still do.
Well, we don't have hundreds anymore, but we do have some.
Yeah, we got rid of quite a few of them.
Yes. Well, everybody, we hope you liked our great owl episode bonanza.
Well, people are definitely seeing something that they just can't explain. I mean, there's no mistaking a regular barn owl to something that's 5 feet or more tall, that flies.
Right. And yeah, I could see the shadow. Like if it's at night, you might be a little overestimating because you're seeing the shadow
Definitely.
of the creature. But in the daytime, like
There's
you
no
said,
way. No way.
yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Well, if you'd like to know more about this episode, check out our sources in our show notes.
There's lots of stuff there.
Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Thank you all again for joining us, all you fellow wanderers, and we'll see you all next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
Yeah, we got to go shovel. See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.